Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Today, we have the great honor and privilege of having Mr. Edward Cutler with us. Mr. Cutler was diagnosed in 2013 with stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer. He's a native of Tampa, Florida, and went to Pennsylvania for college and met his wife, Donna, there. After getting married and serving in the US Navy in the Vietnam War, he went back to Tampa and worked as a certified public accountant and tax consultant for over 50 years until his retirement earlier this year. Mr. Cutler and his wife have 2 adult children and 3 grandchildren, all of whom live on opposite coasts of the USA. He is joining us today with the American Lung Cancer Screening Initiative to share his story. Mr. Cutler, thank you so much for your time and willingness to be here with us, as well as for your service in the Navy.
Thank you, Priyanka. It's a pleasure to be here with you and everyone else on the podcast. My story began back in 2012, actually, even though my diagnosis was not until 2013. I had no symptoms whatsoever prior to diagnosis. And what led to that diagnosis was seeing an ad in a magazine for older adults, which stated that every man over the age of 50 who had ever smoked should be screened for abdominal aortic aneurysm. And since I met the criteria, I asked my primary care physician to order the screening. Subsequently, I got the results back that said there was no aneurysm, but in a footnote to the report, it was stated that there was a mass in my liver and follow-up was recommended. That was the beginning of my cancer journey. There were a lot of blood draws, x-rays, scans, and an MRI, followed by a meeting with my primary care doctor and a GI specialist. Their opinion was that a mass was cancerous, but that a biopsy was necessary to determine what we were dealing with and what course of action we might take. Before going any further with them, I decided to get a second opinion at a large NCI designated comprehensive cancer center right here in the city where I live in Tampa. After the initial consult, a biopsy was ordered and performed, followed a week later by receiving the results. It was then that my wife and I learned that the mass in my liver was actually a metastasis from my left lung, that I had non-small cell adenocarcinoma, and that I had no known genetic mutations. Due to the fact that my primary tumor was in my lung, I was then transferred into the cancer center's thoracic clinic, met with the department head, and then assigned to a medical oncologist. The medical oncologist and we spoke about a treatment plan. A clinical trial was actually offered to me before we even went any further than that. However, I only had a weekend to decide whether I wanted to try to get in that trial or not. We conferred with one of my wife's relatives who is a thoracic surgeon and another close friend who is also an oncologist, a radiation oncologist. And we decided that we wanted to go ahead and try the clinical trial. Unfortunately, the weekend passed, and when I called back on Monday, I was told that the trial recruitment had ended and the last spaces had been filled. That took a little bit of the breath away from me, but we decided on a schedule of chemotherapy, and that's when my treatment began. After 4 cycles of chemo, one of the chemo drugs in the cocktail was dropped, and I was then considered to be on maintenance. And this maintenance treatment lasted a total of 16 months, at which time it stopped working. At that point now, we're at the end of 2014, and there are no other FDA approved treatments for my specific cancer. Only some clinical trials that might be available. So we started to look at those. And I was able to begin treatment in the first clinical trial in January of 2015. At that point, it was a 2-drug cocktail. One of the drugs has since been approved by FDA and is now in common use. The other is I guess it's a companion drug that's used in a lot of other treatments. The results of that trial were good from the standpoint of tumor size reduction. In 7 months, my tumor size had been reduced by 70%. The side effects, though, were pretty severe and got so severe that I ended up being hospitalized and ultimately had to withdraw from that trial because my oncologist was fearful that the side effects would return and be as fierce or fiercer the second time around. So I did withdraw from that trial and had to wait for, I guess it was about 5 months until a second trial became available. And I began that second trial in January of 2016. That was a single drug immunotherapy trial. It is the only immunotherapy drug that I'm aware of that is oral. And I wish every immunotherapy drug were oral like that, because it was just so much easier to take rather than having to go in every 3 or 4 weeks for an infusion, to be able to pop a capsule twice a day. That trial continued on until November of this past year, at which time it terminated. And because when the trial terminated, there were still 2 people participating who had good results during that trial. Each of us was granted compassionate use, a single patient treatment program. And that began concurrently with the termination of the trial. So I've been on continuous treatment with that drug now since early 2016. The first 5 years, well, the first year of that treatment, things were kind of bumpy up and down. But after a year, my cancer stabilized and I remained stable for 5 years, through the end of the trial into the beginning of the single patient program. And up until April. And in April, after that latest scan in April, my oncologist said that he saw no evidence of disease. And that really blew us both away. We were just praying that I would remain stable for a very, very long period of time. I was not expecting my tumor to totally disappear at any point during my life. So we continue on. I'm still in treatment, and I had my latest scan just last week, and it showed continued NED, no evidence of disease. So that's basically where, what my journey was. The diagnosis obviously was devastating. Even though I had been a smoker, I knew that there was a chance that I could get cancer, but there was no such thing that I was aware of as lung cancer screening. My doctors knew I was a smoker. They never suggested that I get screened in any way, shape, or form. Sure, they always recommended that I stop smoking. And, I did, and I started, and I stopped, and I started. But ultimately, it took the diagnosis to end my smoking. And yes, I have been smoke-free for a long time now. I never knew or ever heard of anybody who had lung cancer when I was diagnosed. I was a little fish in a big pond, had no one else's experience upon which I really could rely. My wife and family and a few friends were my support system in the early years of my treatment, and my cancer center had social workers and assigned me to one to help guide me through treatments and potential side effects. But I had no way of communicating with other people with lung cancer. And that was something that I had to make better. I had to find a way to make better on that. What motivates me to tell my story is that I've proven that a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis is not a death sentence. Next month, I will be celebrating my 9th cancerversary. I've had good quality of life and been able to enjoy family milestone events. I've continued working full-time through my treatments until I retired earlier this year. And I've been able to share my experiences with others in support groups that I've found and joined, and with newly diagnosed patients who need a mentor. Let's see. In addition to providing support for other lung cancer patients, I'm also involved in lung cancer awareness activities, advocacy with our federal and state legislators to gain increased funding for lung cancer and other cancer research, and doing some volunteer work with my cancer center. The principal misconception that I had about lung cancer before I was diagnosed was that only people who smoked could get lung cancer. And I think most people still feel that way today, unless they have been touched by someone who has lung cancer. But I subsequently learned that nearly 20% of lung cancer patients are never smokers. They've been exposed to secondhand smoke, or they live in a house or have lived in a house that had radon, or other toxic chemicals to which they've been exposed, and that caused their cancer. So I think we have a long way to go to really expose the public that it's not just smokers that get lung cancer. That if you have lungs, you can get lung cancer. Let's see. What else do you want me to say?
No, I completely agree, Mr. Cutler. Like you were saying, I think there exists a stigma, unfortunately, around lung cancer that that smoking is associated with lung cancer, that only smokers can get lung cancer, but I think it's so important that we educate people that there are other risk factors for lung cancer other than smoking, like exposure to radon or exposure to asbestos, a family history of lung cancer, and a variety of other factors that can also cause lung cancer. So it previously it's been called a smoker's disease, and I think we really need to move away from terms like that and associations between lung cancer and smoking, because as you just said, anyone with lungs can get lung cancer, and no one deserves it. So I think educating people about these other risk factors and finding ways to modify the current lung cancer screening guidelines. Right now, lung cancer screening is only recommended for individuals between the ages of 50 and 80 who have a heavy smoking history. The requirement is 20 pack cures or more, and those who are current smokers or quit within the last 15 years. So right now, lung cancer screening is by the USPSTF only recommended for individuals who have a heavy smoking history. But I think a lot of research is being done right now in the field, and a lot of individuals are finding, a lot of research teams are finding that there are lots of other risk factors and variables that we need to account for as well when determining an individual's risk for lung cancer. So we're really hopeful that with the research, we'll be able to build better lung cancer prediction models, as well as possibly modified screening guidelines that can help identify high-risk individuals who might not be smokers. So I think you bring up a very important point there.
Yeah, the other thing I think is that the stigma does continue, and public misconceptions are out there because of it. Somehow the advertising that we see today impresses upon the viewers that it's smoking. If you stop smoking, you're not going to get lung cancer. And that's not necessarily true either. You see these horror stories, these pictures of people who have COPD or have had other issues as a result of smoking, and that's what they're pressing on, and rather than pressing on the fact that it's not just smoking that causes lung cancer. That's what we need to get changed. But the public misconceptions have relegated the biggest cancer killer in the U.S. to the lower end of federal funding for research. It's made it harder for people to get screened for lung cancer before it's spread to other parts of the body. And if we can change those perceptions, if we can impress upon our legislators to provide more funding, to change the focus, that's got to be the best way to improve our situation. We've got the least amount of funding, and I've spent time not going to Washington, but having conversations with my legislator and senators virtually about funding. I have gone to Tallahassee to lobby our legislators for the state of Florida for more funding for cancer in general and specifically for lung cancer. And now, most recently, I've gotten involved in helping to get some legislation proposed in Washington to fund a lung cancer screening, a mobile lung cancer screening unit for my cancer center that'll go all over the state. And that legislation is still in subcommittee. I think it has been approved in the subcommittee and is now moving into the Appropriations Committee for determination for the 2023 federal budget. And if we can get something like that going, there are just so many people who don't have access that we can get moving, that we can help.
That's amazing to hear, and just want to thank you so much for your work and your advocacy work. It really is helping a lot of people. And as you mentioned, I think a lack of access or difficulty to access screening centers is a big barrier for a lot of individuals. In some states, they don't have a lot of screening centers and might be a couple hours away, and it's difficult during the work week to be able to go make those appointments. So I think a mobile lung cancer screening program or van would be extremely helpful. And we haven't really had many of these in the US, or any pilot programs like this before. And so I think just being able to start or pilot a program like this would give us a lot of information on whether people are receptive to efforts like this, the uptake. And so I think the work that you're doing is wonderful. So thank you again. And you mentioned how not a lot of people think about getting lung cancer if they've quit smoking or have never smoked. And I think this is a similar story that we hear from a lot of patients. We recently had Miss Diane Colton on our podcast, and she's based in Canada, but she had a very similar story. She was a former smoker but had quit for a long time, and her primary care doctor actually had told her that she didn't have to worry about lung cancer because she had quit smoking, and so it was never on her radar. And she didn't get a lung cancer screening test because her primary care provider didn't think it would ever come up. But I think on that line, I think it's really important that we also educate all healthcare providers about the risk factors for lung cancer, symptoms of lung cancer, who should get lung cancer screening, because patients really do trust their doctors. And if we are able to educate doctors about the screening guidelines, and if they have a patient who meets the screening guidelines or might be at higher risk for other reasons, just that simple conversation about maybe getting lung cancer screening in the future could be really helpful. So I think that is an area also that we can work on.
I agree that is very, very important. The primary care doctor is the one who's in charge until there's a diagnosis. And if that doctor isn't proactive, his patients aren't going to thrive.
Right.
So yes, we need to educate the primary care docs a lot better than they have been educated in that regard. They know that there are, at least in large communities, they know that there are screening facilities available. And if they don't know it, they're falling down on the job.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one question that I wanted to ask was, you touched upon this a little bit, but what was the experience like when you received your lung cancer diagnosis? Maybe what were some questions that were going through your mind just after you heard that you had lung cancer?
Well, as I said, that diagnosis was devastating. The GI doctor who actually gave me the diagnosis did not have a great bedside manner. He was very matter of fact. He said, "You have lung cancer, and you need to get your affairs in order because you're going to die." Well, that totally blew us both away, to be honest. I had a million questions. Where was I going to go from here? He said, yes, I'm transferring you to the thoracic clinic and they're going to take care of you there. So yeah, that when I got to the doctors in the thoracic clinic, I had a much better feeling for what my future might be. They were very open that there were a lot of different treatments available, and they had a lot of success in patients having longevity. Now, I was 67 at the time, and I had young grandchildren, and I really wanted to be able to spend time with them. And I'm very, very lucky that I've been able to do that, even though they live far away. We're able to travel to visit them, except during the pandemic, which gosh, on so many things that included. But earlier this summer, we did travel to Pennsylvania to see my second granddaughter graduate from high school, and that was wonderful. And next year, God willing, we'll see my older granddaughter graduate from college and move on from there. But going back to when I was diagnosed, I was scared. I was really scared, and my wife was too. But we decided we were going to fight and fight for everything.
You mentioned earlier. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But you mentioned earlier that your primary care provider just said that you really needed to get your affairs in order and you only had 9 to 12 months left to live. So in what ways did your life change after hearing that and being diagnosed with lung cancer?
Well, it wasn't the primary care doctor. It was the first oncologist that I met. We had our documents fairly well in order, even at that point in time. Of course, I rushed to review my will, medical surrogate documents, whether I wanted a DNR and those things, just to make sure that they were properly executed and were current and were what my current feelings were. And so we got those rearranged, fairly quickly.
Right after hearing your diagnosis, obviously it's a whirlwind of emotions. You can't really perceive what's going on necessarily, but what would you say, looking back, are some questions you believe are important to ask your PCP after receiving a lung cancer diagnosis?
Well, in my case, first question I asked him, in actuality, I asked him, why didn't you see this coming before now? Even though it wasn't a lung cancer screening that caught my diagnosis. It was something that, I saw an ad for and asked about. He was not proactive at all. Yeah, I thought he was a good doctor, but he fell down on the job. So, I felt that, that was something that, I couldn't live with that. with him as being my primary care doctor anymore. And I did change doctors pretty rapidly once I got myself situated and knew where I was headed, or thought I knew where I was headed with my lung cancer treatments.
Following your lung cancer diagnosis, did you share it with anyone? And if so, how did you start that conversation? Because I know some patients and families of patients with lung cancer struggle to figure out how to tell people, since it's hard for everyone to hear.
No, it's not easy to talk about it. At least initially, it wasn't to me. Of course, I told my two adult children. My grandchildren, I did not tell. At that time, they were still. Well, the oldest one was still relatively young. She was, I think, 12 or 13 at the time. And the youngest one was only about 4. So obviously, he couldn't understand what I would be talking about. But I did tell my children, and they were very supportive. And whatever we needed, they would be there to help, even though they live far away. And then beyond that, I started telling a few close friends and other relatives. And I felt comfortable doing it. Surprisingly comfortable. I felt that they needed to know what I was going through, and that if I needed help, would they be there for me? And pretty much everybody was online with that. They were there to help, if necessary. And as time goes on, I've told more and more people. I'm very, very involved with my high school class, and our reunion committee I'm a member of, and I've told everybody on that committee, basically at the very outset, at that time, we were planning our 50th class reunion. And I told my wife, Donna, I said, I'm going to that reunion, come hell or high water. Even if you have to take me there on a gurney, I am going to be there. Thankfully, she didn't have to get a gurney to take me, and I was able to enjoy that reunion. And we're now planning our 60th reunion, and that's going to be coming up in the fall. And I've told a number of my other classmates beside that, the reunion committee, and other friends all the time. And had many offers to, whenever you need me, I'll be there. And fortunately, I haven't had to call on anybody except on a very rare occasion. But I know that they would be there if I need them.
In what ways can family and friends help support people diagnosed with lung cancer?
I think there are a lot of things that they can do. I think it's important that they not say, let me know if there's anything I can do for you. That's the worst thing that they can say. Because that puts the onus on you as a patient to say, well, I need you to do this or that or that or that. Instead, they should be asking the question, can I go to the grocery store for you? And what things do you want me to get at the grocery store for you? Can I take your clothes to the cleaners? Or for someone who's young with children, can I take your kids or pick them up from school? Those things are just so important and so meaningful to people. Can I take you to treatment? Or when can I take you to treatment? Let me know and I'll be there. Those I think are the biggest things that people can do to be helpful.
What would you say are some of the current challenges the lung cancer community faces?
Oh, let's see. Overcoming the stigma is number one. How do we overcome the stigma? We just have to keep fighting and educating people. That's the primary one, And I think public awareness in and of itself needs to be wider spread. The commercials that we see on TV don't tell the real story. They're telling the story that if you smoked, you're going to get lung cancer. And they don't say anything about the non-smoker. And unfortunately, there are a lot of non-smokers. And that number is growing. And I think that the average age of lung cancer patients is getting smaller and less. I've seen so many in the course of my experience with support groups. I've seen so many young people in their 30s or in their early 40s with lung cancer. Now, I know there are some that are even younger than that. I've not had the occasion to meet them, but everyone still thinks that lung cancer is the disease of older smokers. The average age is 70 still, but it is declining. So I think those are really the two main areas that need to be worked on there to be better. We need to get more people involved in the lung cancer community.
I completely agree.
I think you guys are doing a great job from what I've seen, and getting more young people involved in spreading the word on lung cancer awareness and advocacy. And I think that's what it's going to take. It is you guys. You're the future of the lung cancer community, whether you are a patient or just an advocate. You are the future.
I completely agree. And thank you for your kind words. It really means a lot. And speaking about the younger population, I think one of the reasons it's so important to educate the upcoming generation is because not only will it help raise awareness among themselves and keep them aware of the risk factors and symptoms of lung cancer, but I think it's also important in moving away from the stigma that we have right now, just by educating people from a young age about how lung cancer is not a smoker's disease and that anyone can get it. I think that can help us remove the stigma that currently exists around lung cancer. And what would be your recommendation in how we can best raise awareness in the younger generation? Is there anything particular that you think would be effective?
I think what you guys are doing is a step in the right direction. You know, I know that friends of mine have younger children who are now getting involved in awareness. They're getting involved in ribbon building projects, you know, like this one behind me. You know, I think when they are involved in things like that, they're gonna get more involved in the overall awareness program and the advocacy program too. I think both of them go together.
And for someone who has a loved one who recently got diagnosed with lung cancer, do you have any advice for how they can best support them and help them?
I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. You know, offer whatever assistance you know you might be able to do for the relative. Bring them a meal. Take them out to dinner if they're up to it, and you know, do their grocery shopping for them, and things like that, and just show them that you care about them, because in too many cases that lung cancer patient still feels very, very much alone, at least in the early stages of a diagnosis. I know I did, even though I had, you know, my wife and my children as good support. I still felt alone.
What advice do you have for other patients?
Wow, that's that's a pretty open-ended question. I think learning as much as you can about your disease, about available treatment programs, about clinical trials, knowing where to go, who to ask if you have questions. You know, you can't always ask your oncologist. You know, do you have a nurse navigator that you can ask questions and get pretty quick answers to? I think those are the important things, really. Just, you know, get as much as information as you can. Because the more you know, the better able you are to make a decision on what would be best for you.
Thank you for that. But I think that wraps up our questionnaire section. Thank you so much, Mr. Cutler, for taking time out of your day to share your story with us.
You're welcome.
Now I would like to open the floor for our participants to ask you any questions they may have regarding you or your story, and if you feel comfortable answering them. So if you guys would like to ask Mr. Cutler a question, feel free to put in the chat or unmute.
I received a question from the audience. The person asks, Mr. Cutler, thank you so much for sharing your story. What are some pieces of advice that you would provide for individuals immediately diagnosed with lung cancer? And what are some of the best questions that they can ask their doctor right after the moment?
I think the most important thing to ask your oncologist is what kind of treatment is this that you're recommending to me? What do you project that it will do for me? What kind of side effects will I get from this treatment? what do you project the benefits of this treatment will be for me? And do you have any idea how long this particular treatment might last? I know these are questions that are pretty subjective even today. But because there are so many treatments out there, and each one is dependent on each individual's situation. If an individual has a genetic mutation of one kind or another, that obviously is the most important thing to know, even before you start treatment. Been diagnosed, they've done a tissue biopsy, and they've sent it off to testing, or hopefully they've sent it off for testing. And the first question that I would be asking my doctor is, how soon are we going to get these results back so that we will know what the course of treatment might be? Because they can all be very different. I believe those are the most important things to be asking.
What are you looking forward to most in the next upcoming months?
Upcoming months, continued NED. I won't have another scan until September, but I'm betting that it's going to be just as good as the last one. My prayer is that the drug that I'm still taking now will continue to work, no problems. And if it doesn't, then I'm hoping that there will be that next treatment available to me. There's so many things in clinical trials today that might work for me. They might not, I don't know. I've not researched them because I've been so successful with what I've been doing that I didn't think that it was appropriate to jump the gun. But it is in my thinking that I need to look forward, and hopefully I'll never need that next treatment. But I hope that it will be available when I do need it.
I mean, we wish you the best of luck, but that wraps up our Q&A session. So again, thank you so much for your willingness to share your story and perspective on many of the pressing issues in the lung cancer community. We appreciate the work that you are doing to help raise awareness about lung cancer.
Thank you, Greg.
And thank you everyone for joining our podcast. Please keep an eye out for our upcoming podcasts and events, which will be listed on our website, www.alc.org. We also encourage you to join our monthly newsletter, where we will share updates on upcoming projects within our organization. Please fill out this Google form in the chat if you would like to be added to our mailing list. And before we end this, we also would like to offer a brochure highlighting some key information about lung cancer and lung cancer screening. If you find this helpful or know of anyone who might benefit from this information included in the brochure, feel free to share it. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Cutler.
Thanks a lot.